Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 333 webinar by HDFC Securities. I'm Payal Pandya from the Investment Advisory team, and today the subject that we are going to discuss is banking sector, double whammy for some, and RBI's red flags. And to discuss this critical subject with us, we have Darpin Shah, who has more than a decade and a half of experience in this field and has been associated with HDFC Securities for over 8 years. Welcome, Darpin.
Yeah, hi Payal. Thank you for.
Hi. So Darpin, when recently we talk about all COVID impact and loans that have been, the growth that has been slowing and now moratorium. How do we see, in the recent times, a lot of private banks have been, taking away the share. And when it comes to moratorium, we have seen that lot of moratoriums that were as of April 20 have declined, is what the management commentary suggests in the Q1 results of some of the banks and NBFCs. How do you see that panning out? Are we like stabilizing on NPAs, or then there are other arguments that this is likely to increase further? It's a bubble that is being created, or where do we see it?
Yeah, so I'll just give a small background. Banks were doing pretty well till the first week of March. Things were looking very pretty. Growth was decent, and NPA for the sector as a whole were declining. Post-COVID, the things have completely changed. The 3-4 months of lockdown has significantly impacted the capability of many financiers, including banks and other NBFCs, in terms of collections and asset quality. To protect this, RBI came up with the moratorium. It was just in a relief for borrowers that they are not required to pay any kind of EMIs during this period. The worry which has built over a period over the last 3-4 months in moratorium is, will the credit culture for the borrowers get impacted because of this moratorium? And what happens to a borrower if he has to pay after 6 months? Will he be able to pay, or will he default? So that was the reason where banks were under pressure, assuming that a lot of NPAs will be created in third quarter, that is a December ending quarter, and for the fourth quarter, that is which is March ending quarter. However, since April till July, if you hear, as you rightly pointed out, many managements, whether it is banks or NBFCs, have commented that borrowers have shown the interest or intent to pay EMIs, and the moratorium book for many of them has declined to almost half. Say, for example, like an Axis Bank, which was at 26%, has fallen to 9.5%. Like an AU, which was around 25-27%, has fallen to almost 11%. So there has been a drastic or dramatic improvement in moratorium book for almost all the lenders, which is very encouraging sign. Having said this, it doesn't mean that NPA worries are completely behind and things will look completely rosy from here onwards. The remaining portion or the remaining moratorium still needs to be tracked, and in 3Q we'll still be seeing some kind of elevated slippages and provisions for the banks.
Okay, so also as per RBI, okay, in their credit risk analysis, they have indicated that the gross NPAs could reach as high as 17.8% in the industry over this FY21. So where is it more inclined towards? Is it more private specific or more public bank specific, or is it sector specific, or which way do we understand this?
So RBI in its financial stability report has mentioned about, so they do various scenario analysis, and there they have mentioned about what can be the worst come scenarios, and GNPAs could rise to as high as 17-18%. We believe that this will be largely driven by the public sector banks compared to the private sector banks. If you look at the asset quality or the GNPA numbers for the sector, private banks are much better placed compared to the public sector banks. So public sector banks, barring SBI, everyone is at almost 13-14% kind of an NPAs, whereas private banks are much within control. So the major hit of or the major NPA rise will be coming from the public sector banks.
Okay, and how do you see the credit growth happening? Because if I just had a few basic numbers that pulled out. Uh, in terms of basic non-food credit in this industry, since Feb, we have seen a marginal decline, in the growth rate. But what is what is really attracting my attention is that in case of personal credit and agri and allied, the loans the loan growth has really shrunk, from say 16 odd percent in case of personal loans and about 5.5% in case of agri and allied. This has come down to 10.6 and 3.5 and that way. But industry and services, there the credit growth has was actually very low in Feb at 0.7 and 6.9, which has now come to 1.7 for industry and 11.2 for services. So, is it not strange that during this COVID-driven lockdown, where a lot of companies have, tried to cut down their capex and expansion plans, and they are getting into more of what you call cash conservation strategies and things like that. In such times, from Feb to May, we have seen an improvement in the credit flow. So as well in services, which is the worst hit sector during the current lockdown. Is it that somewhere we might see a larger proportion of NPS coming from these? Because this kind of behavior is a little contradictory, no?
No, so the thing is, I come. So you rightly pointed out that industry and services growth has been higher compared to agri and retail. See, the thing is, in retail, if you see, the growth was largely driven by credit cards and the housing sector. So housing was consistently growing at around 14-15%, and credit cards were growing at upwards of 30%. Last 3 months during the lockdowns, if you have seen, there is a sharp drop in credit card outstanding or credit card spends which have happened. And similarly, in terms of home loan, the sales which have happened has fallen. So these two segments have largely have driven the fall in overall retail credit growth. Now moving towards industry and the services part, many corporates, whether it is large corporate or mid corporate or even the SME part which you are talking about, or the services part, what they have adopted a strategy is of sitting on liquidity. Given the uncertain times, okay, many corporates have chosen to borrow from banks and keep it as FDs or in current accounts, but staying liquid. So that is why we are
Okay.
seeing since Feb we are seeing that these credit to industry and credit to services has gone up, whereas credit to the private the personal loan segment has fallen. Moving towards NPA, of course, the NPAs in services, that is the MSME segment, will be much higher compared to say a large corporate or the retail segment because they are the most hit.
Okay. So do we also understand in terms of the credit and deposit flow, like I happen to read this in your report itself, that about 65% of credit and deposit incremental is being taken by the private banks, and a very small
Yes.
share now goes with the public sector banks. But if we see in terms of the branch reach and how these public sector banks have really penetrated in the tier 3 and beyond towns and villages and all, their reach is pretty good, right? So what has caused this change? So what we see is a larger pie of the banking business is amongst very few players, and a lot of players are scattered across with smaller shares of like anywhere between 0.3 to 5 is a maximum percentage is what I come across.
Okay, absolutely. So
Is
what has
this
happened?
sorry, continue.
No, no, sorry, you continue. Sorry, sorry.
So is it a kind of alarming, or how do we understand this? Because then what do we do with so many of the public sector banks, and what if in private sector while the big names that we know are very well known for their corporate governance and clean balance sheets and transparency and all, we also have seen the likes of Yes Bank, so, which has raised a lot of attention and even fear to some extent. How do get this?
So just to give a perspective, you rightly mentioned that incremental market share for private banks has been 65% in deposits, and almost a similar number might be for loans as well. Whereas on a outstanding basis, if you see, the PSUs contribute almost 70% of the business. What has happened over the last 3-4 years, especially in the loan side, is uh, PSU banks are starved with capital, and they were also facing issues of higher asset quality or the deterioration in asset quality which they had seen over a period. So that has led to private banks gaining significant market share over a period. Last 3-4 years, again, PSU banks were not able to hold on to their deposits given private banks were aggressive. They were offering higher interest rates in savings, like many banks were offering as high as 6%, which enabled borrower or the depositors to move from, say, a PSU bank to a private bank. Further, the services, which is very well known, services, technology, and other convenience which a private bank offers is far more superior compared to a PSU banks. So this is what has led over the last 3-4 years the incremental market share move from, say, PSU banks to private banks. And what we believe is, as you at the point which you made about Yes Bank. So as I was saying, till Feb everything, or the first week of March, everything was going on perfect. So that was the case even for deposits. So there are two banks which have created an issue recently. One was PMC, and the second, even it was a cooperative bank, but still it had an impact. And also then we had an impact of Yes Bank in the first week of March. Moratorium was placed on Yes Bank, and various issues happened. So these two events on banks led to the movement of deposits also move towards better rated banks or a better named banks. So that's why we believe that after these events, liabilities will be the new assets for banks. So banks with strong deposit franchise, look at SBI, look at the other large private sector banks. They have strong liability franchise. They will stand to gain from this event which has happened at Yes Bank. And this deposit traction, which will continue to happen, will enable the large private sector banks to further gain market share on the loan segment.
Since we have mentioned Yes Bank and SBI, I am very tempted to ask, how do we understand Yes Bank as as an associate company right now to SBI? Is it like at some point in time Yes Bank will be on its own and be able to stably manage their business and once again start to rise in the curve, or do you think we might see Yes Bank as a complete taken over by SBI and as a subsidiary or merged into it fully?
Okay, so the initial belief was that it will be merged with SBI. However, various financial lenders have come and supported the bank by infusing capital. So it remains on its own. It looks that even after the fundraise, the bank will be on its own and try to come out of these issues in terms of asset quality which they have faced. It will take a couple of years for them, but we believe that it will be on its own as of now.
How does it work with SBI? Because it's, I think, the most reliable public sector bank, but at the same time, any bank which is in trouble is usually made to handle by SBI. And if we really bifurcate SBI's standalone and consolidated numbers, there's a vast difference, right? What SBI used to be before merging of SBBJ and SBT and SBM and all of these, the picture was pretty different. And uh, you know even today we see thousands of crores of fresh slippages coming in SBI, while it's the largest bank actually. What's the future for SBI there?
So I agree completely that SBI has seen rise in slippages and asset quality deterioration has happened, but it is not the case that all or any bank which has been impacted or it is not doing well will be given to SBI. We have seen mergers happening of other PSU banks as well. Like PNB taking over OBC and United,
Hmm.
Union taking over Andhra and Corporation, and so on and so forth. But yes, definitely for SBI, if you have to look, uh, given the largest bank, it has its own share of NPAs as well. Having said this, they are far more better managed and well placed compared to other public sector banks, whether it is in terms of asset quality or capital or management bandwidth. So that's where we see, and it is trading at a much attractive valuation. So we have a buy rating on the stock, and it's clearly driven by the liability franchise which I spoke earlier and the valuations which they are trading at. Not to forget, the non-lending subsidiaries of SBI are also doing very well. So whether it is SBI Cards or SBI Life Insurance, SBI Asset Management Company, those are also doing significantly well.
Okay. Coming to a topic of interest rates, in the recent few quarters or maybe a year or two, we have seen interest rates declining. Okay, and due to this, a lot of investors we have noticed have started moving to investing their money in AT1 bonds, which are offering them a better rate and things like that. But a lot of mid-tier banks and NBFCs offer these AT1 bonds with higher rates. So do you think these it's going to be risky for the investors to get into such bonds of mid-tier banks? What's the kind of future these would have? Since we have seen some uh, banks and NBFCs in trouble, how should an investor deal with it? Should they really get out of those investments or keep it, or move to larger banks and compromise a little bit on their interest rate earnings, or what would you
See,
suggest?
it clearly depends on risk reward, what the investor is looking at. The most sensible thing will be, as the current rates which are, if you have to assume a 10-year yield at 5.8 times, and if you have to assume a 81 at say almost 9% from a large private sector bank or an SBI, I would prefer to stick to a private the better names rather than going towards the mid tier and smaller names. I might get lower interest rate there, but the risk reward is favorable.
Okay. Is there anything in particular about uh, the sector, the current troubles that it has been going through, that you would really put light on, that maybe everybody should know and be very watchful of while investing?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, our broad thesis for the sector is that liabilities will be the new assets. That is the most important part. So while investing, you need to look at the funding capabilities of the bank, whether it is in terms of capital or the liability franchise, plus the corporate governance, which is at most importance for the financial sector, and the bank's ability to absorb any kind of credit losses which might emerge because of COVID. Okay, while this is very uncertain, in next 6 months, what is going to happen to provisions and NPAs, we believe that banks with better PPOP margins or operating profit margins will be doing significantly better in terms of provisions. We have already seen large banks making huge provisions in last couple of quarters to protect their balance sheets. So that is an encouraging sign. So we'll suggest investors that they should look at banks with capital, liquidity, and better provision coverage ratios, along with good corporate governance.
Okay, and what would be your best picks even at the current prices from, say, maybe the large caps and the mid and small space?
Okay, so we have as I mentioned earlier, we'll prefer large private sector banks, and amongst PSU banks, the only preferred bet will be SBI.
SBI. Okay. So, also very recently, RBI has increased the LTVs on gold loans for banks from 75 to 90%.
Yeah.
And in the recent past, maybe 2, 3 years, or not even 3 years for that matter, banks have started becoming a little more aggressive into gold loans, and they have, started at least in places where they are adequately present along with the niche NBFCs. They have eaten up a little bit of market share of these NBFCs, and now if this LTV increase up to 90% goes on till 31st March, isn't it going to make life even more difficult for those NBFCs? They are already in on compared to banks, NBFCs are facing larger troubles in terms of business and recoveries and everything. So, in terms of gold loans, will this not eat up a lot of their share? And how will banks deal with the same kind of customers who will come to them after, say, 31st March, expecting a higher LTV? And that's not going to happen probably as of uh, the regulation right now.
Right. So just to my perspective on this is banks gold loan book is very small compared to the overall pie, so it will not have a material impact. Second is generally banks don't cross. So even before the regulation changed from 75 to 90, banks were still at say 55-60% LTV ratios. So they were well within the limits. So even if it increases now, it will not have a significant impact on the NBFCs. If you look at NBFCs, the gold financing companies are only two, Muthoot Finance and Manappuram, which are predominant names. Their LTV ratios are also in the range of 60-65%. So I don't think so there will be a material impact on these NBFCs, especially the gold financing one which I'm mentioning. Also, these, especially Muthoot Finance, has been getting money from banks and they are not seeing any kind of funding issues. So I don't see a material challenge for Muthoot Finance from banks in the current environment.
Okay. When it comes to banks such as, say, RBL Bank or IndusInd Bank, how do you think they are, going to be able to deal with the, stress going ahead? Because it seems they have had a lot of trouble managing their NPAs and, even loan growth for that matter. So, do you think they will be able to, come back to the glory days very soon?
So, as I earlier mentioned, liabilities is the key in the current environment. And both these
Hmm.
banks' liability franchise is slightly weaker or relatively weaker compared to the other large private sector banks. To an extent, IndusInd is slightly better compared to RBL as well. Okay, so definitely, they will see some time to be on track again. And as I mentioned earlier, in the interim, asset quality will be an issue for many of the banks, and RBL and IndusInd will be part of it, given their unsecured book, which is at a very high proportion.
Hmm.
So we believe that in the near term, it will be a challenge. The additional cushion which IndusInd Bank has is they've recently raised money, so that will provide some cushion, and that's why we have an IAD rating on the stock.
Okay. Raising money reminds me that as per RBI's study in the financial stability report, if the car is likely to go down to say 9.3% towards say the end of this fiscal, do you think all the banks have enough potential to raise money to balance out their car and things like that? A lot of banks would actually face this trouble, right? Not everybody is going to be in a position to manage that because
Absolutely.
they are not going to get
Absolutely.
additional funds from their PNLs because high provisioning NPAs will drive a lot of provisioning. They can either reduce their provision coverage ratio, but not as much. They will have to maintain the regulatory requirements to a certain extent. So how will they get their cars at a stable level? Because if they don't do that, I think they will not be able to grow their businesses adequately. So it's like a vicious circle which they might just get trapped
Absolutely.
into.
Absolutely. So that was I was mentioning earlier. PSU banks have a much lower capital adequacy compared to the large private sector banks, or even for that matter, the mid-tier private sector banks. Okay, so there will be an issue for PSU banks and the relatively much smaller private sector banks to raise funds. But if you see again the large private sector banks, they are flushed with capital adequacy. Everyone is about 12, 13, 14%. So that is where the comfort we derive from. About banks,
That,
each and every bank raising money, it will be really difficult. So large private sector banks, again, you must have seen in the media, many of the large private sector banks have already raised money, whereas the
hmm,
mid-tier banks are still considering it and they're still waiting in the queue to raise the money. So definitely, the larger ones will have an upper hand here.
okay. That can also, do you think that at some stage, because India's banking sector is so scattered, we will suddenly have a large scale, consolidation from, so many 42 listed banks approximately. This number could come down and private and public could really, merge into few larger organizations.
So we have already seen that PSU mergers happening. Okay, now it about mergers happening in the private sector banks. If you look at the bottom of the list in terms of private banks, there are banks where capital adequacy is extremely low. Those banks could be merged with the larger ones, but it will not materially change anything for the large banks. This is what we believe. And the merger between or the acquisition from by a private bank of a public sector bank, it will be a great idea to do that. So the mid-tier bank can also be at a much larger scale, but for that we need to wait for the government's approval or their thought process on the same.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Bapin. This was very insightful. There's just
My pleasure.
one, last question I'm itching to ask, that
Yeah, yeah,
we have
sure.
seen this NPA trouble, right since 2015 when the first AQR happened, and since then every year we have been saying that okay, now the NPAs have bottomed out, it's all over. We are now going to come out of this trouble and soon the growth will pick up and things like that. And it has been half a decade now. uh, what's your take? I mean, obviously it's difficult to really put a number of years to this or anything. uh, how do we deal with this?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a never
So the
ending
first
process.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the first comment which I made was about asset quality. So till March, if you see, banks or the entire system as a whole was showing improvement in asset quality. Okay, on a sequential basis, or if you look at on a YOY basis, there was some kind of improvement which was happening, especially in the private sector banks. No, so it was an encouraging sign. Now with COVID, we believe that next 1.5 years again will be the same case where NPAs will rise for the system as a whole, and this time led by MSME and to an extent the retail segment. So that pain will definitely be there, no doubt about it. So it will take another 1.5 years for the system to stabilize and then see an improvement in asset quality.
Great, Darpin. Thank you so much for such an insight on one of the most difficult to understand sectors. I'm sure we are a lot more clearer. Thanks a lot
Okay.
for joining us.
Sure. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks everyone for joining.